Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Somerford Associates podcast. We're doing a series of interviews with people who are leaders in technology and people in roles like you, listeners, with aims to discuss current topics that will help you in your environment. So please feedback to us in the comments section or using our hashtag here to help with ideas or topics that you want to cover. So I'm Anne, I'm the Technical Director at Somerford Associates, and I'm honoured to chat today to Neil Thacker. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Anne. Yep, thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. So Neil is the CISO of Netskope, and Netskope is one of the Magic Quadrant technologies, providing cloud security, visibility in real-time data, threat protection when you're accessing cloud services, websites, private apps from anywhere. It's one of our tier one partners. That's why we can chat to you. Is that a fair summary of Netskope, or?
Yeah, I think there's a few acronyms you didn't mention. We love an acronym
Go
in
on
the
then.
industry.
Throw in our acronyms.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, we're a cloud security company founded in 2012. So we have thousands of customers across the globe. We have 25%, for instance, of the Fortune 100 are Netscope customers.
Good start.
So the cloud platform itself, this is where the acronyms come in, is we utilize a number of microservices. So be it a secure web gateway, so we call it a SWG, SWG. We call it our next gen secure web gateway because it's cloud-based. It understands more than just traditional secure web gateway. So that's one. We also are a CASB, a cloud access security broker. And also we offer a private access capability, which is probably the best acronym of the bunch, is ZTNA, which is Zero Trust Network Access.
Cool.
So those are all the kind of buzzword acronyms in organizations and analyst organizations put together in terms of describing a certain market and products. We have that capability. And again, in summary, we are a cloud security vendor. We take traffic from an organization that's destined to the cloud or to websites, and we put in security controls to protect data and also look for threats.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
That makes it very clear. Thank you. And so being a CISO of someone like that, well, how did you get there? Were you always in cloud or?
No, so cloud really for the last 5 years. So
Yeah.
I've been in the industry for 20 years, which is a very long time.
Pre-cloud.
Pre-cloud. Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that there was, we didn't call it cloud, but it was cloud. Okay. Back in kind of the late 1990s, I think that's when we had kind of Salesforce was launched, and that was actually a cloud application, but the term was coined. But yeah, so I started in working in IT. I'm a big techie, so I was a big fan of technology, and I made the move into security again in the very early 2000s, as the organizations I was working for were being attacked and they had malware and these kind of things. I think the first instance was the big real kind of incident that occurred was this thing called the blaster worm, which affected my organization.
Awesome. I just love the names of them.
Blasters.
Great.
Yeah. But it was, these things get coined in the industry, and obviously we follow and we refer to them. But in summary, what it was a pretty basic piece of malware that was pretty much used to perform a denial of service on Microsoft. So the author was we didn't know this at the time, but it was an 18-year-old kid who was, just wanted to get back at Microsoft, didn't like Bill Gates. So that was, but again, it was one of these things, it was a worm, it propagated, it actually affected quite a few organizations across the globe, I mean, thousands of organizations across the globe. And it caused, again, as part of the goal was to cause a SYN flood attack on, as I said, on Microsoft's website update service. But it actually caused a secondary impact to the machines that it was found on, like it would have basically crashed the machine. So at that point in time, it actually caused quite a significant impact to the organization. So overnight, they said, right, we now need a full-time security employee. And
who's going to be the guy?
I was the person that was that was kind of elected, because I'd done the initial investigation. I did the reverse engineering of the malware. Yeah, I obviously uncovered what the cause was.
Awesome.
That's kind of how it all started. And then over the next few years, I was working in financial services, again, as a security professional. And then I moved outside of the city and I joined Camelot in 2006, Camelot, the operator of the National Lottery. And they just launched a few years before the National Lottery website. And of course, when you have a website, when you move into that kind of channel and you're offering services and the ability for people to play online, of course, people will try to attack and compromise. And also, Camelot at that time were obviously processing and holding huge quantities of personal data. They were transacting with card data. They were bidding on their new licenses and all these kind of things. And I was their person looking after security operations. So I was dealing with all of those kind of things. And then we had a series of attacks, and across the globe, people like Anonymous and LulzSec, the well-known hacktivist groups.
Okay.
And again, that pretty much put the cybersecurity, as we now call it, cybersecurity on the agenda. And,
what year is that? Round about?
This was around 2008, 2009. So kind of midway through the time I was there. And cybersecurity became a big thing. So not just information security, not just protecting data and dealing with compliance and at the time, the UK Data Protection Act, all those kind of things. It was now we need to start thinking about cybersecurity and attacks from outside of our organization. And of course, I stayed there till 2012. And then I moved into vendor land. So I moved over to work for a vendor, because at the same time, again, vendors were also responsible for, again, security programs, and they had to support all of their customers, many thousands of customers. And it, of course, just made sense that every vendor has a security team as well. And I saw that as a great opportunity for me to join and for me to be able to go out there and talk about security, again, to a kind of wider audience.
Yeah, that sort of was something that I wanted to ask you actually about your role, because Netskope is in itself a security project. And then the CISO, your role, and CISOs in any organization is all about keeping their internal security on form. So do you have the chance to kind of help your product develop as well as doing the internal stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we call ourselves customer zero.
Yes,
so we are
that's a nice thought.
We're not customer one. We want the first customer, because I'm sure there's certain discussions around at Netskope having to pay for our own technology. I'm sure there has been.
I bet they'd love that.
We cover it as being customer zero. So we utilize our technology. We're a cloud first company. With the exception of all of our data centers, we have 50 data centers across the globe.
Wow.
That we need to obviously support, secure, maintain, and manage. But everything else is cloud first. So we're a cloud first company. So we have over 1,000 employees.
Yep.
We use hundreds of cloud services, like every organization does at the moment, if they know it or not. We're pretty lucky, because through Netskope, I can see how many cloud applications we are using, all the new applications that get onboarded, and all the controls that I need to apply. So, but again, the idea really is that the CISO role, I think it's really valuable working in a vendor, because we also then have, I call them my peers, CISOs in our customers, and I'm able to work with them and help them understand some of the ways we're using Netskope at Netskope, and also listen back from them to understand how they're kind of utilizing our products. So in some ways, we're kind of a proxy for development, and also our goal really. We have our CSO team, our office of the CSO, and it's a combination of CISOs and security strategists, kind of looking at the market, understanding where there's kind of the next big thing, but also working with our customers and the CISOs out there to make sure that we're meeting their requirements moving forward also.
Yes, you've just got to be cutting edge, obviously.
You got to keep listening to new use cases. You got to be listening to kind of where the market and the trends are. And I think one thing that we do very well at Netskope is kind of our innovation, right? You mentioned Magic Quadrant. We're kind of at the furthest right in that Magic Quadrant.
Yeah, that really magical spot.
It shows you are the innovator. So I mean, and again, I think I'm hoping that's part and parcel to. It is part and parcel to the vision of the company, but I'm hoping that some part of that is because of the CISO team. Well, not just me,
for sure. No, but I suppose I mean, talking about big trends and global what's going on, there's an elephant in the room, so to speak, and that's COVID-19. Because when we're recording this, there's a pandemic going on, and we're all in the middle of that, working from home if we can work, and all the challenges from that situation are adding to the usual risks that companies are, or future risks that they're trying to forecast. And it's an interesting time, right, for a CISO.
It is, and it became an interesting time overnight, pretty quickly. I mean, I think we knew something was obviously, of course, happening in kind of January and February, but I think it was only really until March we really realised the full impact.
Yeah.
And this is the same for, I mean, for every organisation out there. I think they realised that within a few weeks the whole world had changed. And I think from a security perspective, we saw two things. One, organizations just wanted to make sure they could continue as best possible in terms of BAU. So they immediately started thinking, well, if we kick in our BCPDR plan, our response to the pandemic, it's going to be, we don't have an alternative site to go to. It's a global pandemic, so you don't have a second office. Usually BCPDR, you have a second office that you can go.
So usually you have that as part of your, given you could move somewhere else, but you can't here. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I would almost say that, I mean, that was probably the case up until 5 years ago. That was kind of guaranteed. If you're a large organization and you had critical processes that needed people in an office, you'd have a secondary site that was just a hot site waiting to be used. But of course, in a pandemic, it doesn't matter where that site is because you can't really fly people, you can't move people around. So of course, and I think organizations had planned for many, many years for pandemics. I mean, I was involved in the original SARS pandemic planning in the early 2000s and in the swine flu pandemic in 2009. And it was only really, I think, towards the end of the 2000s that we started thinking about remote workforce instead of secondary site for these things. And actually, I don't think you can be fortunate in a pandemic, but at least I think organizations have been somewhat fortunate is they had the technology and the capability with cloud primarily to be able to move and allow their remote workers to continue business as usual as best possible.
Yeah.
But I mean, from a risk perspective, again, there's two sides. So it's just getting everybody working best they can remotely. We had a lot of organizations talk to us because, of course, we're cloud-based. We can act as a proxy in the cloud. Organizations wanting to move away because, for instance, we had one organization that said our approach is VPN.
Okay.
And their approach was not going to work out for them because they were told that their new VPN appliances would take 8 weeks to arrive.
So you have 2 months where you can't do anything, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, 2 weeks to install, 2 weeks to pretty much operationalize. So 12 weeks, of course, that would be just way too late. And again, they were looking at cloud and their goal was to move to cloud in 2021. But what they decided, there is no option. We have to go now.
Yeah.
And that was one of the wins that we helped them with in terms of that approach. And then we had other organizations that had already moved to the cloud utilizing our services. I mean, huge large organizations that again were able to quite quickly switch over.
Yeah.
The issue we saw is that switch over is that there were still, of course, incidents. The number of incidents were initially dropped.
Incidents of like malware attacks or incidents of any security problem?
Yeah, so those numbers dropped around kind of DLP, so data leakage prevention incidents. Initially dropped because obviously every organization was focusing on the critical processes. And then what happened is that a week or two later, those incidents started creeping up. And we actually saw a significant increase in the number of DLP incidents, mainly because one, everyone was now collaborating using a multitude of different tools, third party. And supply chain providers, everyone was now collaborating more and more than having meetings and these kind of things. And then we also saw the number of sessions for these other applications have just exploded. We're working with an organization that they're using Microsoft Teams for collaboration, and they went from 10,000 concurrent sessions per day to over 200,000.
Yes.
So there is going to be more noise. There's going to be more levels of activity.
Yeah.
I think that also highlighted that the risks were apparent, and also at the same time, when you have this type of crisis, this type of situation, um, attackers, again, cyber criminals, etc., will take advantage of these certain situations.
Yeah, so fraud has gone up, hasn't it? I mean, everywhere
Yeah,
seems to be, fraudulent.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I can believe what was happening when I heard about hospitals being attacked and
Oh, I didn't know.
ransomware being in place because, and of course, hospitals. I think it was primarily in Italy in the very early stages of their crisis, and of course, I think the world was in disbelief that this would be happening.
Yeah,
Um, and I think what we've seen is that again, attackers will target those because they know that that's a quick win. They can get a payout. A
yeah,
hospital is highly, and a government are going to pay out to get the
yeah,
hospital back up and running, which is, I mean, it's crazy. But even when we saw the number of domains and malicious URLs that were being registered, just increased. I mean, phishing. We're using the COVID kind of term again. I think there was a 14,000% rise in the number of targeted specific phishing attacks, and so those are the kind of things where all the kind of force multipliers in terms of that situation. So from a CISO perspective, it was a pretty tough time.
yeah, for
Those
sure.
first few weeks were pretty tough. But again, I think what we saw is that those are the challenges that organizations had.
Yeah.
But of course, there's ways to overcome those challenges.
Yes, there's always a positive in the end. Hopefully there will be when we get through this. And do you think what the risk environment's permanently changed? Or because I see that now we've got used to remote working, there might be this whole much more movable workforce, and businesses might just embrace that and just do far more of it, where people moving between roles, people moving just far more agility in an organization. Do you think that might?
Yeah, and I think we've seen that over the last few years. So, I mean, when
Mm.
we talk about the gig economy and freelance workers and people working on specific innovation ideas and projects, that has been happening in organizations. But with, I think, in a post-pandemic world, we're going to see more of that, right? There's going to be more um, collaboration, again, with kind of business partners and with contractors, and there's going to be lots of M&A activity, so mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
As what we kind of expect will be the kind of the economic fallout of all of this. There'll be lots of M&A. So there's going to be lots of new people that start in organizations. People move between roles. There's unfortunately going to be people that will be leaving organizations as well, as organizations perhaps can't sustain that current workforce. So there's going to be lots and lots of changes in terms of personnel. And I
Mm.
think that's where again, with something we've seen, for instance, is that if you look at the average organization, they're using about 1,200 cloud applications and services. And if I start thinking about having to manage roles and access to 1,200 cloud
Oh,
applications for a few hundred people in my organization that may be moving and shifting around, it just becomes
it just makes
uh,
you weep.
yeah,
So does Netscope automate that sort of thing, or?
we can absolutely help with that. I mean, from one understanding which cloud services you're consuming,
Mm-hmm.
who's accessing those cloud applications for what
Yeah.
purpose. So again, if somebody is moving between roles, again, how do you transition that? How do you remove their access? How do you make sure they don't download data from the application to try and upload into another application because it's one of those things. We talk about this from a data governance perspective. We need to manage the data. We need to protect the organization. We need to protect the employee as well, because the employee may be thinking they're doing the right thing in this approach, but again, there may be lines that
Yeah.
unfortunately have been crossed in terms of that type of activity. So there needs to be an area of, again, one, as I said, understanding the applications being used and for what purpose and by whom. And also levels of access control and
Yeah.
data protection, and of course that threat protection as well, because if somebody's moving to another role or starts in a new organization,
Yeah.
they may be a target. They may be targeted specifically because everyone puts a great announcement on LinkedIn. I've just joined.
Yeah. I've just joined this thing. Of
I've just
course
got
you
a
do.
great new job, and it's like, well, now everyone is available to anybody, and perhaps again, it's somebody could pick up on that and decide that
Yeah.
actually, yeah, this is a good time to target that organization and use
Yeah.
that information to their advantage.
Yeah. So you need to be quick on your decommissioning or changing, and yeah. There's a lot of nasty people out there, aren't there, on these? I didn't realize that there was such an industry around it.
Yeah, and I think if you look at there's different types. I mean, cyber criminals and cyber crime is still, I think, the number one in terms of kind of the quantity and the types of impacts we see in organizations. But of course, you also have nation states. So
Yeah.
and of course, in a turbulent time, potential financial crisis, recessions, these things are, again, terms I don't like, but I think
Mm.
everyone will expect these kind of things to happen. That there may be some more activities
Yeah.
around these kind of things. So yeah, understanding that particular. I mean, everyone talks about the threat landscape. You need to understand the threat landscape and how it affects you and your organization. But again, I think it's just being prepared for that. It's just
Yeah.
having at least as much visibility as you can
Yeah.
for those types of attacks and techniques.
Yeah. Absolutely. So from my perspective at Somerford Associates, we work with clients, and across the board, we always have budgetary considerations. Obviously, we want to make money, so we want to make sure we control what we spend. Obviously, so I guess we're lucky because we have like a suite of solutions that will suit our clients' pain points. And what I see fairly often is our larger companies have so many tools and things. They're thinking a lot about tool consolidation. So trying to make sure that they're not overlapping the kind of features that things can do, especially cloud features, and sort of trying to consolidate that for budgetary reasons. Do you see that as well?
And that's been my personal goal. I think 2006 was to reduce the number of tools that I'm using.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was I inherited about 50 technologies to deal with security, and it was just it was a huge task just to kind of update them, maintain them, making sure you saw value, and not these tools becoming shelfware, just not being utilized for their intended purpose.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. I think again, speaking to CISO colleagues of mine, they're all trying to do the same thing and trying to reduce the number of tools they're using, and just make sure that they're also consolidating their requirements and choosing the right type of tool and the right type of product.
Yeah. Based
Um,
on that threat environment that they understand. So what do they actually need? And
exactly, and I think cloud is a great catalyst for that, because if we start thinking about, again, I mentioned before that the quantity of cloud applications and services being consumed by the average organization. If I now think about the majority of traffic that leaves an organization, I mean, even if you think about it from a remote worker perspective, there are things that you may need to VPN back into
mm-hmm.
to access. That's kind of legacy, traditional. It's been built in a data center the company owns, but that is the exception right now. We're seeing, I think, the average organization sees about 85% of their internet traffic goes to SaaS applications.
85%.
So
Wow.
85% in terms of volume. It's a huge
Yeah.
volume. And again, if you think
Yeah.
about it, it kind of makes sense. The number of cloud applications being used, the volume of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you also think about it from a controls perspective, you should always follow where your data is. You should
Mm-hmm.
always follow where, again, the applications and the requirements are set that you need to manage and protect the application. If you look at the shared responsibility model for SaaS as one example, they highlight clearly that it's the customer responsibility to manage access control and data protection.
Yes.
So
Well, obviously they can't take the responsibility for that across.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, no, even if you wanted to do that, you wouldn't want to use their controls because you need a control for each application. It just doesn't make sense. You then end up having more tools and more
Even
control
more,
duplicate.
yeah.
So there is this kind of goal really to consolidate and look at that type of traffic and think about what is necessary. Again, if you don't need to patch those systems anymore, because that is something that the cloud service provider is responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't need to manage and vulnerability manage and scan all those kind of things, then actually really all you need to do is make sure that your connection to that application is being managed.
That's
You're
nice.
applying levels of access control, and you apply levels of threat and data protection.
Yeah. So it simplifies your task as as a
Yeah.
security
And I have a great
function.
analogy. I have 3 toolboxes upstairs with all my tools uh, in my in one of those cupboards that nobody really wants to open.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I have 3 is I have so many tools that I've collated over the years. But what I do is I make sure I've got my really simple, the tools that I really need 95% of the time right at the top. I can grab that and I can do majority of DIY around the house.
I see.
Those
Yeah.
tools, and then if I need to, I can go to my second or my third toolbox, or if I absolutely. But to be honest, it's almost to the point now where I'm thinking actually that third toolbox time to get rid of it. It's
The
just sitting there
space it's
not doing
keeping up
anything.
in your cupboard, you know?
Yeah,
You could
exactly.
rent it every time you needed that. That's a good analogy to your work, actually. It's really good. So, in the industry, where do you think we should be thinking we're going next? I mean, for me, I'm not a CISO or anything, so this pandemic was like a big kind of shocker for me. But people in your role, people who are listening, and everyone really would like a heads up, really, on what are the next big trends going to be? What's your opinion on that? Do you have a hint for us?
Yeah, so it's going to be, everyone talks about automation. Everyone. I was speaking to a number of other organisations this morning who were just really focused on automation. They want to automate as many kind of basic business processes as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But when they say basic, they kind of mean actually that again that can be that very easy to automate, and actually they can then build upon. So that kind of that workflow, that workload itself can be automated. So that is organisation wants to do that. That can simplify many of their kind of their activities, their tasks. That if you think about it from an organisation perspective, an employee satisfaction perspective, if you can automate a task that's relatively simple and you can move that person onto something more advanced, then of course that should be the way to go.
Yeah.
I think we've seen that. I think automation. Everyone talks about machine learning and artificial
I was about to
intelligence.
say, you're not using those buzzwords.
Not using those buzzwords.
Good for
Well,
you.
yeah. So I mean, AI. Yeah. I've tried to read as much as I can around these things, and I've taken courses, and there's some great courses out there that you can take on these subjects. And I think what it is that you quite quickly learn that again, a bit like the acronyms I mentioned at the beginning. Somebody has to come up with an acronym to explain what it is from
What's
a
going on? Yeah, put a
yeah
label on it.
yeah, and it's you just have to refer to them. But I think I think machine learning is definitely something organizations are embracing.
Hmm.
So, for instance, we've seen a big demand for us to explain more around our own machine learning kind of engines. We have a series of machine learning engines that can deal with things such as malware classification and file fingerprinting and looking at phishing detection. And I mean, this is kind of how I think most machine learning from a security vendor perspective started, because you could never analyze the number of phishing emails that organizations got. So you had to use
A machine
levels
to do
of,
it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you had to do that. But then looking at kind of the more advanced stuff that we've seen, kind of image detection and looking at finding out a certain type of image and what type of image is that? Is it a passport? Is it, you can actually feed again engines with this from a kind of almost deep learning, supervised deep learning perspective, which is another kind of. But that's where I'm seeing most organizations look at. And again, from my perspective, again looking at applying those types of controls to 85% of that traffic,
Yeah.
not requiring lots and lots of people just to go through and look at that type of activity. It also helps you from a privacy perspective. I don't want anybody. I
Oh, I
mean,
see. So you don't have like an actual person looking at your passport or whatever
yeah,
it is.
exactly. You're not having somebody sitting there thinking, is this suspicious activity? Do I need to perhaps raise this with HR? Do I need to, oh this is interesting. He's now going onto this website and these kind of things. Nobody, of course, wants that. And
Yeah.
if you think about all the guidance that we have out there right now around privacy, yeah, across the EU, we have the European Data Protection Board that have also recently stated that again, organizations should be utilizing kind of automated technologies to do this rather than having people watch what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And I
Because
think
who
that
watches
that's
the
kind of,
watcher? You'll have someone behind someone else's shoulder. And
so who's watching the watcher's watcher. So
yeah.
it's yeah, and I don't think anybody actually wants to do that as a job either, right?
No.
There's so many things that you can't inherit as a side task in your role, but nobody really wants to have to deal with that. So it's much better to utilize again levels of automation
Mm-hmm.
to help do that. And I think what we've seen is that even from from a cloud perspective, from a resource scaling and all those kind of things, it's also that level of automation is also required, because otherwise what happens is that you have you're going to miss things.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest issue in security is if you miss something that's really important, it could be relatable to a breach.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, from most organizations, they really don't want to miss those issues. So it's I still say, everyone then says, well, does that mean that we're going to need less people in security? And unfortunately, we need more people. we as an industry, we need more people than ever. But we also need, again, to utilize our automation technologies
Yeah.
to help
Free up
support
people's
those.
brains. Like, so if you've got all of
Yeah,
the really creative hackers doing some interesting new things, you
yeah,
need to free up your securities people's capacity so that they can counter that.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
automate the countering of it because that's the creative bit, and that's the, well, not yet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, I mean, humans and machines I mean, we utilize machines every day for simplifying tasks and getting our jobs done, right? So there's no difference in terms of that. It's just it's the kind of the more advanced analytics and those kind of things and the algorithms that we need to use. But we do that and support that with data.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is we can also these algorithms and these things can be tuned by better understanding the data. And again, unfortunately, machines do work faster than people. They can process huge quantities of data versus a human brain, right? Our neurons just don't fire fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to utilize that advantage.
Yeah, why not? Exactly. Okay, you definitely have thoughts on the future. I like that. You more than answered my question. It's brilliant. It was lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining me, because I know it's clear to me that the CISO role is one of the most stressful and busy in a modern company, and even more so at this time. So I just really appreciate you taking the time out to chat to Somerford and me. So thank you.
No problem at all, Anne. I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great to talk more on any one of those subjects.
Oh yes.
Thank you so much for arranging this. If anybody has any questions on anything that's been raised, then of course you can reach out to myself or Somerford, and yeah, it'd be great to talk to you some more.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. So indeed, if you do want to follow up on something, as the listeners, as I said, we're here to help, and so you can get through to me if you go to somerfordassociates.com, and just feel free to get in touch. Love your feedback. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.